Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and joining me for, well, is it right to say strolling down memory lane with these films? Is my very good friend Adam.
Strolling's maybe not the word I would use. Tumbling,
Yes,
collapsing, like fall, like in like an action film where like the floor gives way and like the main characters fall through several floors.
oh yeah.
I feel like that's what the metaphor for this falling through the building.
It almost reminds...
Anyway, good to be here.
Yeah. What a start. It actually reminds me of, have you ever seen the film GoldenEye?
Oh yeah,
The James Bond one. Do you remember the bit where one of the villains, throughout the film, he keeps saying he's invincible when he's like shot at, he gets blown up, or he doesn't get blown up, but he nearly gets blown up, and everyone's just like, oh, I can't believe this, and he's like, I am invincible, and then at the end he just gets frozen, and it's like, that's how I feel when you're watching these films, and you're like, or some of them. And you're like, this isn't so bad, and then you get to a certain point, and yeah, it's not the best sometimes. Oh, goodness me. Honestly, see, like, between researching this and a few other things, like, there have been a lot of surprises today. I mean, I told you what happened to me today.
Indeed,
Didn't I? So, just to kind of give context before we jump into the topic today, you know how you get those adverts on YouTube for different advertisers? Like NordVPN, Raid Shadow, all of those kind of things. Well, I got a real life version of that today when somebody knocked on my door and it was a guy from HelloFresh, which I did not realise that they actually made, house calls. Like, did you know that?
No, I did not know that either. But every day is a school day.
Yeah, he started. So let me give you context. This guy came to the door. He had his HelloFresh mask on. He had a big apron on, and he started asking about my cooking habits and things. And I was like, it's like, if I didn't know what HelloFresh was, I would have been gravely concerned. I was like, are you here to offer a sponsorship for Satsunami or even Satsunami? No. It's like, yeah, no. So when I told him he wasn't interested, he just kind of was like, all right, okay, and walked away. And I was like, this is weird. Yeah. So yeah, that's my fun fact of the day. Or rather, fun encounter of the day, which
there you go.
Seems to be few and far between. As you can see, today we are indeed going to be tackling a very controversial topic. In fact, would you say this is controversial? In terms of gaming, sorry. Let me reiterate.
I think it probably still is. I think it maybe has died down a bit because I think we've just maybe become numb to the idea that this is a phenomenon now and it's going to happen. So I don't think maybe it's as heated as it once was, but I still think it's still a controversial thing for many gamers. And probably for many film fans as well.
Well, that is true. Yeah, if you think about it though, video game films are that weird in-between, aren't they? Some of them are either so bad they're good, or they just don't appease anybody. They don't appease film buffs, they don't appease video game fans. In fact, there's a perfect comic which I always bring up on the stream. I always bring it up, and I just think it encapsulates this perfectly. It's like a stick figure who plays a game that's called Blue. So it's just literally the colour blue, and he's playing this game and he says, oh, this is fantastic, this is great, I love this, oh boy, they're adapting this into a film. And then he goes to the cinema and he looks, he sits down, he's got his popcorn and everything, and then 2 seconds later the screen flashes up, and instead of the colour blue on the screen, it's the colour red, but it's got the words blue just painted across the screen, and the guy's look of horror on his face is just fantastic. And that's kind of how I feel, well, at least for some of them, because definitely we talked about this last week, where we talked about the Super Mario Brothers film, which is probably the most infamous example I mean, well, maybe not the most infamous, but one of them. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, it's definitely one of them. Again, I'm not sure if it's the most it's up there, though.
Oh, yeah, because it's one of those ones that they took a chance at something different, and yeah, it didn't really work. But I mean, we kind of spoke about this, like, or we touched on it a little last week, about the kind of landscape at the time, around, like, the kind of 80s and 90s, like, of films, or video game films, rather. Would you say it's right to assume that there were a lot of terrible video game films coming out at that time? You know, would you say that was probably its lowest point?
Probably was. Like, yeah, like, I did feel there was a lot getting churned out, but, like, yeah, with not much soul and everything, so you probably, yeah, I would say.
Because, I mean, as we said, we've got the Super Mario Brothers film, you had the Mortal Kombat film, which I think you and I watched in one of the bad film nights, which had some really interesting moments in it. Like, that was one of the ones that was so bad it was good. But if you went in, you know, wanting to be, or not wanting, but if you went in as a Street Fighter fan, I don't know how much you would like it.
Yeah.
Or rather, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, either way, like, whatever fan you were of these films, even Mario, not Mario, sorry. In fact, no, Mario, yeah. I was like, Mario didn't have a film. I can't believe I suppressed that just like that, you know. Speedrun of suppression, guys. Exactly.
I mean, I think the one thing you can say in their favor was at least this was like the start of it. So, you know, you're like, okay, maybe this was okay. This is obviously we know how this ends, but like, going back to that time, being like, well, maybe this is just teething problems. You know, like this is the first time they're trying to adapt video games into films. Perhaps you know, something can be awkward when they first start, and perhaps they'll grow out of it. Like, because I was just scrolling through some films to remind myself again, and there's a lot in the mid 2000s. The mid 2000s actually, I think, might rival. I know I said the 90s there, but I think the mid 2000s might actually rival for the worst because there was a lot of stinkers there.
Do you know what actually reminds me of? And this might sound like a weird example, but you know, superhero films.
Yeah,
it reminds me of the trend for that because in the 90s you had like Batman and things like that, but there were a lot of stinkers. Between like the 90s, the early 2000s, it was not a good time for those kind of films, but it's exactly the same for video game films. Of course, we've got to mention like one of the most infamous directors, of course, Uwe Boll, which I take it you've heard of him.
Unfortunately, I have.
Yeah, the German director, the man, the myth, and the I don't want to say legend.
Reprobate.
The reprobate. Thank you. I don't have my thesaurus stand, so thank you for that. Yeah,
I'm being kind for calling them that, I think.
Yeah, for those of you who like don't know about Uwe Boll, he's an interesting character, but he's directed some of the worst video game films I think of all time. That of course being like Alone in the Dark, Far Cry, which I didn't actually realise had a film.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I genuinely didn't know that. Blood Rain as well, you know, I think...
House of the Dead.
Yep, House of the Dead. I could be wrong, but...
Postal.
Oh god, Postal, yeah, the list goes on.
There's an absolute ton of them.
Yeah. And apparently the reason they did it was like a tax scheme or something like that. Like genuinely, it was something to do with Hollywood. It was either Hollywood producers or people who wanted to make films in Germany. There was like a tax loophole. So they ended up hiring Uwe Boll to like make these films. And it didn't matter whether the films like gained money or not. You know, it's like it didn't matter. It could like absolutely tank. But because of like the tax laws or something, they would still be getting their money back. So it was like, it doesn't matter, you know. But I feel as if like that is probably detrimental in the long run. Like especially in regards to, you know, how video game films were perceived as a whole.
It just shows what a talentless hack he is as well.
Well, don't say that too loud because he will challenge you to a boxing match.
Oh, fair enough. He could probably beat me up. I'll give him that.
I'm not even joking with that, by the way. Did you know that? That like yeah, there was like a point in his career where he got so peeved at like negative responses he actually called out critics and he started saying things like, yeah, I'm going to beat you up in a boxing match. And
it's a good cut of the game. I'll join him with it.
Yeah, some people actually took him up on that offer and you think, is that the best idea?
Did they actually happen? Did they, or was it?
Yeah, no, some of them actually happened.
Really?
Yeah, there's pictures of him in the ring, so whether or not it did go ahead.
Did you know what? He may not have much talent, but I'll give him credit for that at least. At least he's a man of his word in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, at least he didn't say, oh, I'm going to beat you up, and then he didn't.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's kind of like the schoolyard bully, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's
Yeah,
like,
basically it is.
oh, I'm gonna, beat you up, and then he doesn't. But no, he is a very horrible man. But apparently, he runs at least from what I read about, he ran I think it was a restaurant or a diner, and I think it was Vancouver. Could be wrong in that, but yeah, he got into the restaurant business, and ironically enough, his like reviews for that are booming. They're actually really good.
Oh, good for him. Well, there you
Yeah.
go. He's found his area.
Yeah.
Niche, that's the one.
Yeah, even though it took him like, 1,000, 1,000 bad films and a couple of YouTube videos where he told everyone to F off. Other than that, but I feel as if we've got the elephant out the room, kind of. But would you say that was like one of the worst things to happen to video game films?
Oh, I think so, because that like set a trend. That I think that's, you know what? I think that's why many people probably have like an opinion of video game movies. Like, okay, fair enough, the ones in the 90s were bombs, but at least they were like big studio bombs in a way. At least it was big studios backing them. When you've got like some like when you've just got some like guy just making them for peanuts, and they're absolutely terrible, and there's like no redeeming features in them at all. Then like I think if you think of a video game movie, that's probably what you think of. You're like, God, it's just some obnoxious German guy, trying to get like tax breaks. So I think it was very damaging.
Could we get that on a t-shirt?
Make it happen.
Yeah. Let's crowdfund it and see if it gets more than Uwe Boll's actual crowdfund.
Let's make a film about Uwe Boll.
I think he
meta.
Oh god, I think people have already made films about him. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a film out there. In all seriousness.
Well, right, there's one about bloody Tommy Wiseau like making the room and stuff. Like you can definitely have one about Uwe Boll. Like I don't know, he seems like a film. He seems like a character from a movie, in fairness, rather than an actual human being.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. And it is kind of weird to look at these films nowadays when they're so popular. Well, then again. Now, I'll take that back a step, because although we've got films like, I mean, the most successful ones I can think off the top of my head are, of course, Detective Pikachu and the Sonic film, which, despite their kind of like wary response, more so for Sonic because of the the redesign for the model, that was an absolute nightmare. And Detective Pikachu, people thinking I don't know, because as far as I know anyway, unless there's some obscure like film out there, like the only real Pokemon films are of course based off the anime, so they're the animated ones, which although the first couple came out here, they didn't really reach like that kind of height, if you know what I mean. It wasn't like a yearly release like over here in the cinemas. That kind of got more and more obscure. So when Detective Pikachu came out, it was like, is it going to be as popular? Is it not? But there is that kind of sense of skepticism.
Yeah.
Like when you hear, oh, they're going to adapt a film from like a video game, you kind of think, is it going to be good? Like in all seriousness, when you hear, for example, like BioShock, is that not meant to be getting turned into a film?
Well, it was rumoured. I thought it was cancelled, but maybe it's come back again now.
Yeah, no, it's probably still at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, which is a shame. But it's like, when you hear that though, because I know BioShock is one of your favourite series, like how did you feel about that?
Trepidation is the word. Like, it's one thing when a franchise like Sonic or something, a franchise that like I'm not like a fan of, I don't know that much about, is turned into a video game. I'm a bit like, ugh. Fair enough, but I'm filled with utter trepidation if if it's a series that I really love, like BioShock, or something like that. I just don't there's not enough positive proof out there for me to believe that it can be done well. maybe in the future we'll get more. There'll be better adaptations, and it'll start to tip the scales. But at the minute, honestly, I'd rather they stayed away from, especially franchises that I love.
I mean, do you think they probably tried to take it a bit safer with video game films, like in terms of their plot and like what happens in them?
I think some of them certainly do try and play a more safe road. Yeah, like it's weird because it again kind of depends on what the game you're choosing to adapt is, because some of them do have more easily adaptable stories than others. So you can be a little bit more like, that's a little. Some video games do have quite like by the numbers plots, so you can quite easily translate those over, and make a relatively safe plot, while with others you're kind of forced to maybe the game's more wacky, or like it's like the Super Mario Brothers film. Like, how would you? Okay, now you could probably adapt a plot from one of the latter Super Mario games, like Odyssey or something. But in 1993, what plot line was there to adopt from a Super Mario game? There was nothing that came close to a recognizable film script. So you had to. That's why they had to do this weird, like, weird dystopian Dino Hatton thing, because like, you can't do like, can you have 90 minutes of a portly plumber running right and jumping, like, So again, it really depends on what you're working with. Something like Prince of Persia or something, at least there's a story there that, perhaps you don't do it that well, but you could at least like take it and be like, right, we can make this like a by the numbers action film. I know there's like Silent Hill. I heard divided opinions on the Silent Hill film. I've never seen it, but again, that's a plot that you could probably just like make it into a kind of bog standard horror film. So I think maybe as well, but there's a big studio behind it, there's probably more of a temptation to try and like appeal to the masses and make a safe product.
Yeah, like kind of leaping off of that idea that they are like pushing a safe product. Like in terms of the Silent Hill films, I know there was a severe lack of understanding of the source material. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a big like Silent Hill fan, because I'm terrified when it comes to these kind of games. Read as, I am a wimp. But from what I know, there's a particular character, for those of you who don't know or haven't played it, called Pyramid Head, who is supposed to be like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but is it not like a psychological manifestation, or sorry, a physical manifestation of psychological guilt or something like that?
Basically, that's what he is.
Yeah, like he's supposed to be the embodiment of that.
Sorry, that's what he started off as.
Oh yeah. Before they became like part of a keychain.
Yeah, before they tried to put him in like all the recent Silent Hill games.
Oh god, exactly. Because it reminds me of those meme videos where it's like, no, don't turn me into X. So it's like, no, don't turn me into a keychain. And then the next frame, it's just him as a keychain going, ah. But it's true, it's because he's so marketable, he's so like, oh, I recognise that guy, he's the Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. But anyway, sorry, looking back into the films, that's apparently what they did. They just turned him into a scary monster, rather than, having anything more clever.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, like, not being like, oh, this character embodies X, or this character embodies what, it's just like, nah, he's just a Pyramid Head with a large, like, Final Fantasy sword, and you're like, oh, okay.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, fair dues. You know what? Let's not get started on the Resident Evil films. Like, how did they go? Because I know you're a bigger Resident Evil fan than I am.
I have to be honest, I've never seen any of the Resident Evil films. From what I understand, the first film is kind of akin to the plot of the first game. It's like, I think there's some different characters, but like, it's roughly the same idea of like a special forces team go into a spooky mansion filled with zombies. But they went down actually a very, very different route to the games, which is, you could argue, is a positive or a negative. Like, I think there's valid arguments both sides. But it seems to be very much became like an end of the world apocalyptic thing.
Oh.
So it seems that the quality varies. Like, yeah. If you look at this, like, it seems to jump kind of all over the place. Like, I don't think any of them are like what you'd call good. But like, some of them seem to be kind of passable, while there's others that are just apparently absolutely turgid. But yeah, like, it seems to have gone down a very different route, which I think is maybe something that you should do with a video game film. Again, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I kind of think you maybe should put your own spin on it, because again, it's kind of a thing of like, I don't quite get why you would just copy and paste something when there's like something else already there. What is the point in copy and pasting like the Bioshock 1 into a film when there's a game there already that you can play? Is it not surely better to maybe take that universe and try and tell a different story? I don't know how you feel about that, but that's sort of, I'm more in favor of that if they're going to do a video game adaptation.
I feel as if it's a double-edged sword, because I completely agree. There's already the story there,
Yeah.
It's like, all you have to do is take like the building blocks from the game and then create your own thing. And honestly, I'm one of those weirdos who thinks that, the kind of weirder films, like, if they take a property and then they just make it, their own thing.
Yeah.
Like, for example, just trying to think, like, even the Super Mario Brothers, let's kind of backtrack to that. Like, even though it definitely wasn't done well, but at the same time, it was done, you know?
Yeah.
It was like, they still went out on a limb, they still tried their own thing, and whether you think it's good or bad, you know, at least it's memorable. I feel as if that's, like, at least a good thing, that people are still kind of talking about it. Other films, like, going back to one you mentioned earlier about the Prince of Persia, I feel as if that is definitely, for me personally, it's one of the worst, like, adaptations, purely for the fact that I can't remember any of it. Because I actually went to see this in the cinema, and I just remember it being it was both fast-paced and boring. It's a weird combination, you know. It was one of these films that I just sat there thinking, alright, they're going to the next thing, alright, they're going to the next thing, oh, that's the lights up, okay, I've got to go home, oh, where's my wallet? You know, like, going from thing to thing, and you're like, and I know that was kind of half trying to be its own thing, half trying to... Because, I mean, a lot of films do try to distance themselves, I think. I mean,
yeah.
Look at, for example, the recent ones. Like, I haven't played the Detective Pikachu games, but I think they are definitely a little bit different compared to the game itself. Because at least they do, like, a lot of world building and things. And considering the only Pokemon films before this was the animated ones, you know, they did a damn fine job. Even though some bits were a bit safe. Same with the Sonic film. The Sonic film's just like a buddy road trip film, essentially at its core. But because it's still kind of strayed away from that, you know, like So here's the thing. There's actually two examples. Like, if you take the Sonic films, which, apologies, I've just... it's like, I'm bringing it back to Sonic. I'm sorry, I do. But there's actually two examples you can look at here for this particular topic. So Sonic actually has an animated film that was made in the 90s that was supposed to be a lot more closely related to the games. Yeah, it did not do well at all, because it was just a bit too weird. I think I mentioned this before, but they had, like, cat girls and Sonic giving the finger at one point, and Owls dressing up as, like, 90s kids. Whereas, although this one is definitely, the new one's definitely the better film, but it's a lot more safer, you know. It's like it's still trying to do its own thing. Because I'm actually wondering what you think about this. Do you think that it's that struggle of trying to fit, like, because I've noticed a lot of these films try to kind of put the video game world into our world?
Yeah.
You know, like, if you look at Hitman, or maybe not Prince of Persia. I mean, technically, yes and no. It's more, like, fantasy in that regard. You know, but, like, with Sonic, with even Mortal Kombat, I suppose, technically. But again, maybe more fantasy. But, you know, do you think that's a kind of a struggle that a lot of these creators have, or to try and adapt them?
Yeah, I think it really depends as well as, like, if you're making one of these films, right, okay, you're making, so you're a video game into a film.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to obviously attract people who are fans of the game to come and spend their money to see the film. But the chances are, you know, and maybe with maybe apart from some massive franchise that maybe like Pokemon or something like that, where there's like maybe even billions of fans, I don't know. Like there's lots though, there's like hundreds of millions at least. Unless you're doing that, you need to get people in who perhaps aren't fans of the game and might not even be gamers. You need to attract them. So that's a very difficult balancing act, because, you know, for people who aren't fans of these games or aren't fans of games in general, haven't played this particular game, you have to get someone to hook them into it. So I think you're right, like putting it maybe into our world is a way of people will be like, oh, you know, like this, of making it a bit more recognizable to people who aren't fans of the game, if that makes sense. So I think it's, again, one of those like studio ways of trying to cast as big a net as you can, you know, in that kind of like safe, you know, like, we don't want to lose all our money here, you know, on this venture. How can we make this as safe as possible, you know, rather than like just sticking with the video game and then hoping that it can attract people on its like via that way. So yeah, like I think it's just one of those like it's just one of these like byproducts of being like, you know, of being made by like a giant industry that is desperate to like focus on the bottom line.
I can't actually think of a film off the top of my head that's actually achieved. You know, it's had like a film that's actually made for the game, if you know what I mean. It's like, I mean, maybe Pokemon or Detective Pikachu is probably the closest for that, because there's like a lot of Easter eggs and things. But again, that has the luxury of being a well-known brand. You know, you can't imagine something like, I mean... Like, I'm trying to think, like, what other film... I mean, Warcraft technically
Yeah.
did that.
Well,
But
there does seem to appear to be some that have been made by people who are fans, of the games. Like apparently the Silent Hill one, the director was actually apparently a huge fan, and he had the game like playing while he was directing and stuff, and while the production was ongoing to try and keep it as close as possible to that idea. Like I think as well, the guy who made Warcraft, if I understand rightly, I think he was a fan as well, and then I think he says that I got meddled with by the studio, I think is his sort of excuse for why it didn't turn out like the way he wanted it. So like there have been people who have been fans who've made this, but again, you are working with it. Unless you're like doing this, financing it yourself, like you need to there's people above you who have like a stake in this, who are going to put input into it and going to change, and they're probably not fans of it. They're probably looking very much from like an investor. I want a good return from this, so like they come in, things they might do and suggest might not be good ideas. I mean, one example apparently with the Street Fighter film from '94. You might be able to tell us, I've not actually seen it, but I know you have. So apparently the guy who wrote that wanted to be said right to Capcom, right, we can only have a few characters, because I think he said he only wanted to have 7, because he was like, that's as many characters as an audience can realistically remember and get invested in. And so that's I don't know what the Street Fighter roster was at the time, but I think 7 was a quite a big cut. It was at least half of the roster, but apparently Capcom kept pressuring, so more most of the roster ended up in the film.
Oh, there's hundreds, yeah.
Yeah, so does it feel a bit like, it's like, oh, here's God, sorry, I'm absolutely blank. Here's Ryu, and here's oh my God, I'm terrible. Zangief, and just appearing for like a few minutes at a time, and you're like, who's that again? Especially if you're not a fan of the game,
because you've got like a whole subplot in that film of like Chun-Li and M. Bison, and it has actually one of the best lines in the film where she says something to him like, "You killed, or you burned my village," or something like that, and he replies, "For you, the day M. Bison, came to your village was the worst day of your life. For me, it was a Tuesday." And she just looks at him, and the camera just hard cuts to the next scene. It's like, this is incredible, this one. But there are a lot of characters. But I mean, also as well, they had the star power behind that film. You had Kylie Minogue, you had Jean-Claude Van Damme. You had so many people in that film, and it was just insane. And that's another thing they obviously depend on. For example, was it Michael Fassbender that was in the Assassin's Creed film? Yeah.
They had quite a few. Marion Cotillard was in it as well. Oof, I think Jeremy Irons as well, I think, was in it. They tend to get a lot of big budget. You're right, Jake Gyllenhaal for Prince of Persia. Oh God, I'm blanking for. Well, Bob Hoskins at the time was a big thing for Super Mario Brothers. Dennis Hopper. The ones that are made by big studios tend to. Jim Carrey's in the Sonic the Hedgehog. They do tend to attract, get big names in as a way to, again, I guess, draw people in who aren't necessarily fans of the game.
So I'm laughing because I'm thinking of the Detective Pikachu one. It's like, who was in that? And I'm like, oh God, it was the Screaming Kid from the new Jurassic Park film.
It was Will Smith's son.
Was it? No.
Yeah, it's one of Will Smith's son, Justice Smith or something like that.
Is it? Ah, okay.
Yeah, one of the more talented of the Smith kids.
Ah, okay, right.
And Ryan Reynolds. Don't forget Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, Ryan Reynolds, yes. Pikachu was fantastic. I mean, he honestly, see, after Green Lantern, he's just been on the up and up. I mean, once you put that behind him, I'm not saying that was the film that propelled him into the spotlight. That would just be cruel. So, what would you say that a video game film has to do to be a good adaptation? What do you think is the core thing that it needs to do?
I think sorry.
No, go on, sorry.
Well, I think that the number one thing, looping back to a point I made earlier, is you need to choose which game to adapt. Because some of them are better for adaptation, and there are some that just I don't think you could ever adapt because of the way they are. I've heard they're making a Minecraft film. How are you going to adapt? Unless it's some kind of unless it's something akin to the Lego Movie, which it might be something akin to that, and then in which case that might work. But it's the same with as I said, Super Mario Brothers was in many ways a logical choice to pick, but in so many other ways such an illogical choice because it just had no plot. So I think that one. I think the key thing really is concentrate on making a good film first. Being a good adaptation is one thing, but that should be a secondary concern. Make a good film. Because at the end of the day, people are gonna more remember, oh, that was a great film, rather than that was a below average film. But my God, that was a good adaptation of the source material. Nobody's gonna say that, outside of some some random defenders of it, but concentrate on making a good film first, and like that's what I think people have tried to do, and in the past, but other reasons have kind of got in the way. Also, as well, like you need to get people in who are fans about the film. I think that's why some of these like video game movies have bombed so much, because you can just tell people aren't that. Do you think anybody who made the Prince of Persia film was like a fan? Was like a diehard fan of the series? Do you think anybody on that kind of writing or production or directing staff was a genuine fan?
No, I don't see it.
It doesn't come across, does it?
It comes across as like people who were late for their lunch, so they just wrote down anything and then they ran off for lunch after the first draft, and then they never.
Yeah, recent people who read the Wikipedia page for the Sands of Time plot and went, "Let's put that into that." Like, so you can tell, like, so you need to get people who actually care about it, and that might have been difficult maybe at a time, But I think now you could definitely find like we have generations now who've been reared on video games, At least have played. Maybe they might not still be active gamers, but like they will have at least played some of these things in the past and maybe have some fondness for them. So you got to look for those people as well. I think you've got to be ready to put money into it as well, because some of these things are going to be so difficult to like. I can only imagine how much the Warcraft film cost. But like something like that must have been like into the hundreds of millions for like for the effects and the CGI and the cast and everything like that. So I think it's one of the things you need to be prepared to put a lot of money in to do it. Like, can you imagine trying to adapt Halo? How expensive that would be?
Well, like technically, they have like mini films. Like it's not what. See, this is the actual annoying thing about Halo is the fact they do have the resources. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't know if Halo would be a good adaptation." Things is like they've literally done it before, but in shorter form.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, if you look at the live action, and this is going back to episode 2 of Satsunami, this is a flashback discussing Halo, but it's like, that way where it's like, you've seen, like, the Halo Reach and Halo 5, God forbid, kind of shorts and things. They do have the resources and things, but see, this is the thing, it's like, a film could have all the resources in the world, but if they don't have the direction, like, the direction is absolutely key. I mean, do you think that, like, what's more important? Like, do you think, and probably I know what you're going to say, but, like, do you think a film with all the resources but no direction would come out better than a film with the right direction but not as much put into it?
Oh God, no! Like you need I tell you need the right direction, because there's so many examples of like, look how many like big budget like films we've seen that are like flops or aren't good at all, because like they just don't have a competent person at the helm. While people have been able to make really, really excellent films on like shoestring budgets and everything. Like one of my favorite films of all time, like the original Terminator, is made on a relatively like tiny budget. But you had somebody in charge in James Cameron who was a very competent director, and really believed in the project and wanted to do the best he could. And that's why, I guess why I think it's such a great film. But yeah, it's, like you can look at like pick any number of like big budget summer blockbusters that have come out. Like look at the Godzilla one from when was that, the 90s, late 90s? You had what's his name, Roland Emmerich.
Matthew Broderick?
Yeah, the Matthew Broderick one.
Oh,
like, that's like that had all the resources behind it, but turned out to be absolute like dud, because clearly he's just not a guy who has like. Yeah. I don't want to slam Roland Emmerich here, but nobody's got. I don't think if you're like making the list of the greatest directors of all time, his name's going to show up on it.
Probably
anywhere near the top. So definitely like competent direction is clearly the key thing.
It's actually a very good point that you made earlier when you said about just trying to actually get a good film out of it. Because, like, I'm trying to word it because I'm thinking of films like Doom and how technically at the very end they have like a moment where it's like a first person shooting thing. And I don't know, I'm not a Doom fan personally, but like I can imagine maybe like a Doom fan going, "Oh, that's the thing from Doom, first person shooting." But
it's the only good bit in that film.
Yeah, the rest of it is just absolutely horrific. Was that you clapping in agreement there?
No, that was me knocking my microphone off. Having to remind me of the Doom.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Was it you as well that wasn't a fan of Doom?
I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Doom. And again, I think it's maybe akin to like Super Mario. And again, it's been a long time since I've seen it, so if I watch it again, I might have a completely different reaction. But I think it's akin to the Super Mario Bros. Film in that It's a terrible adaptation of the source material. It's absolutely. It's probably actually. I think it's a worse. Actually, no. Maybe it's about on the level of the adaptation of Super Mario Bros. But I think you can have fun with it.
Yeah.
If you want some people, I think you can maybe have fun with it. Again, I'm willing to be proven wrong because it's been a long time since I've seen it. But I think it's on that it's a terrible film, but it's kind of funny, And plus, it's one film where you get to see The Rock play a bad guy. That's a rarity.
Spoilers.
So... Oh, sorry. Yeah, ignore what I just said. For whatever I just said there before, it makes it kind of notable in film history.
That's the only notable thing. I mean, Carl Urban's in it, of all people.
I know.
Although technically, I think that was before he started becoming a chameleon and just acting and everything.
Rosamund Pike's in it as well, and that wasn't long after Everything or James Bond, Everything or Nothing. No, not Everything or Nothing. Sorry, that's the game. Die Another Day.
Die Another Day, yeah.
So there were big Dexter Fletchers and that as well. There's some big names attached to that again. Again, they always seem to attract big names for the most part, but they just waste them.
Do you know, it's really weird because they, as you said, they do. I mean, look at the Tomb Raider films with Catherine Zeta-Jones and things, which you wouldn't expect. Oh, well, I suppose at the time she was doing a lot of action films. She did Mr. and Mrs. Smith after that as well. And
you mean Angelina Jolie, by the way?
Angelina Jolie, who did I say?
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
That's the one. Angelina Jolie, rather. Why did I say her? I know she was in another one, but
Is she in one of them, maybe?
No, I don't think she's in Tomb Raider, but I'm sure she's in some, unless I'm talking to Mars for that one. Angelina Jolie. Yeah, she was the one in Mr. and Mrs. Smith as well. They get really big names for this, for these films, and half of the time they're just wasted.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Michael Fassbender. He is, or rather he was at the time, especially with the X-Men films and things like that coming out. And those were, obviously, they were really popular, so, and he's a good actor as well, but when they bring him into a film like that, and then it gets a really lukewarm response, you're kind of it kind of feels wasted potential, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's what they're forced to work with.
Exactly. It's it's not the talent that's missing. Well, there is talent missing. But not on the acting side, it seems. But I feel as if it is just a really difficult job. As you said, it's a really difficult job to kind of balance the fine line between attracting, the right audience, trying to make something decent out of it. At the same time, I think, here's a question for you, and this is kind of outside of it, but do you think the kind of shift for the perception of video games as a whole has also helped the shift with the films? Or do you think they're both separate? How when we were growing up and video games were just, that silly thing to pass the time, and don't get me wrong, it still kind of is, but with the rise of esports and things like that, and it's getting taken a lot more seriously in some regard. I mean, look at Twitch.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeffrey Bezos, I'm on Twitch. But it's would you say that video game films have also shifted with that perception, or do you think they're still in the same rut as they were in the past?
I think definitely the credibility of video games has risen. The video game industry is now more profitable than Hollywood. It makes more money. Mm-hmm. It's a bigger industry, and so I think you can't really ignore it now because it is such a big industry. And so I think in that term, it's not maybe the poor relation as it once was. I don't know. Again, it depends. I think maybe from a general public view, it's perhaps more accepted now, but I still think there's probably a lot of people who, a lot of cinephiles who still would look down on a video game adaptation, and I honestly can't blame them because, again, I don't think there's that much body of proof to dispel any kind of negative. I mean, that's why I think a lot of gamers also look at it that way, is a lot of negativity, because again, where's the proof that it can be done well consistently? Rather than has there ever been a genuinely great video game adaptation? Maybe the only ones I can think of are Detective Pikachu, and I heard the Sonic movie is supposed to be pretty good. Are they the only real two examples?
The Sonic film is good, don't get me wrong. I surprisingly enjoyed it because I'll give you a laugh. The Sonic film came out obviously last year during the Corona coming out, clashing dates, as it were. So obviously I didn't get to see it in the cinema, but I did see Detective Pikachu in the cinemas rather. It was actually one of my friends who came over and he was like, "Oh, I got this for my birthday," and I was like, "Oh right, what is it?" And he brought out brought out a DVD of the Sonic film, and I was like, what the hell are you doing? Because he's not a Sonic fan at all. He was just like, oh yeah, I was given this for my birthday, and I was like, alright. And we watched it, and surprisingly, it was a good film. As an adaptation, see, this is the thing. At the very beginning of the film, it starts off with like a baby Sonic as, like running around Green Hill Zone, or what's supposed to be. And it's like, it's got Sonic's world, but then 2 seconds later, he throws like a ring up, and that's like a plot device throughout the entire film, that he throws like these rings that, it's not technically like the games, but he throws a ring and it creates a portal, and then he gets transported to our world where he has to hide out, and that's when the kind of adaptation stops. It's like, it's still Sonic, he still, runs fast and everything, and technically there was a series called Sonic X which did a similar thing, where they took Sonic from his world and then they put him into like the real world, quote unquote, real anime world, let's say. But then they tried to like do the stories from the video games, which it really clashed. So you've got like the real world, and then you've got like all these like gargantuan monsters and things like roaming about, and you're like, but again, anime, like more kid friendly than ever. Like you can understand that, but for the Sonic film itself, it was a good film, and I feel as if it was like a good play for them to put it in like the real world. For Pokemon, they actually didn't put it in the real world. I think they did put it in their own, a fake world, obviously. But at the same time, they did it quite well, technically there was like what was it? It was like there was a loophole in the film where, like one of the key tenets of Pokemon is like catching Pokemon and causing them to battle and fight. In that film, there's like underground rings where people fight, but there wasn't much of it like on the surface of the city. And like, as I said, like the plot itself it's no Shakespeare, but then again, you're going into Detective Pikachu. Like, I feel as if you'd be a real arse if you're like, oh, it doesn't compare to Citizen Kane. You're like, stop comparing everything to Citizen Kane. It's like, I adored Detective Pikachu. There were so many like Easter eggs and that's one of the better examples, I would say, of being able to appeal to the fans, because I had a lot of Easter eggs in the background, but at the same time, it still had enough for just casual audiences. I think that's where it really struck gold. I mean, they're both examples of films that really have taken off. With films like Warcraft, I think the reason that's still quite popular is I think it did well in China. Yeah, surprisingly. I don't know why, but one of these oddities, but at least I think it was. Yeah, I'm just looking through the list as well of other films, and I don't think there were many. Like, did you ever see the Max Payne film?
I did watch that one, actually.
How was it?
It's not good. Again, Max Payne's one of these funny ones that, like, I've played the third game, and I really, really enjoy the third game. Mm-hmm. I've played a bit of the first game, and I quite like the Max Payne character, but I don't think I was quite able to get into it, but I really want to try and it's on the list to go back and try and replay. So like I'm not like a particularly well versed in the Max Payne universe, I have to admit. I'm not like a huge fan, but like I do really like it. But that film adaptation was just it was boring and bad. So it was like boring like the Prince of Persia one, but it was also bad like God like Doom or something like that, So it was a bad combination again. But that's one again that has a set story. But it's like it's weird because they tried to like follow the story, but they also changed bits of it. But like so it kind of failed on both levels. It's like a bad adaptation, but also like it perhaps stuck too closely to the story, but also changed stuff that then just was like, why is that in it? Why did you change that? That just makes it worse. So just like the worst of everything, basically. So yeah, not a good one.
See, on that note, should we move on to like what these films shouldn't do?
Yes, yeah, I suppose that's a good segue.
I mean, like I want to pick up on something you said earlier, but it's like a film. If a film's going to be like its own thing, like as you were talking about with Super Mario. At the very least, it was kind of memorable for some bits.
Yeah.
Just because of how wacky it was. Like, if you're gonna like bomb out and completely crash and burn, at least make an impact. Which I know is a very like nihilistic thing to say, to be like, if you're gonna fail, do it with style. The other example I'm thinking of is Street Fighter, which is a bad adaptation, but is a lot of fun to watch. Same with the Mortal Kombat film, like that is a terrible film, but at the same time, again, it's a lot of fun because you've got the cheesy overacting, you've got things like that, you know. I feel as if the worst thing that you can do in a film, like a film in general, but I feel as if the worst thing you can ever do, especially for video game films, is just make it boring, you know, like by the numbers, unmemorable, like Prince of Persia. I know I'm a lot more critical on it than you are, so apologies.
No, I'm not like a defender of it or anything. Like, so, go ahead.
As you button up your hoodie and just like hide your...
I'm going to slap you in the face and challenge you to a duel for...
Yeah. I was going to say you're hiding like your Prince of Persia merchandise.
Just crying in the corner.
Just rewind time. And that's why I think it's very good. You know, it has to make an impact, at least. I think the latest, I haven't seen it, but I think the latest Mortal Kombat was received quite well.
It's supposed to be pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe pretty good too, but it's supposed to be like decent.
Yeah, which is a relief that they're kind of getting off their feet now, rather than... Because, I mean, Uwe Boll, I think, is definitely one of the worst things to happen to this genre of films.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Those kind of, like, creators who are like, oh, I don't care about the film, let's just pump something out and that's it.
Yeah.
You know? There's your film, where's my money, kind of thing. And that is, damn it, like, if he made bad films in general, like, that's, you know, like, people do that, you know, there's hundreds of, like, bad directors out there who make bad films, but to make a bad film and then attach it to, like, video games as a whole is quite damaging to, and I know I keep saying this like a broken record, but it is, it's like, it's really damaging to the reputation of, like, video game film, because don't get me wrong, as I said, no one's going to be like, oh, this is high art or anything, but at the same time, nobody's going to really take it seriously or think, I want to go see that, you know, and they could be missing out on a gem, but, you know, because, like, we've got 100, Alone in the Dark, so...
Yeah.
Which apparently is one of the worst films ever made, would you believe?
It scores very low. I think it's got like 1% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
I do believe.
It's one of those films.
I'll have to watch that one. I'll have to watch that and review it.
Oh, Jesus. You know, that's... What did I say about last week? You're not picking it again.
You're not doing it again.
Oh, but yeah, I'm going to flip that question on to you. Like, is there anything else you can think of that, like, video game film adaptations shouldn't do?
Again, I feel like I don't want to repeat myself again, because I feel like I'm going to repeat a lot of what I said earlier. But again, it's like, if you look at some of the video games that have been adapted into films, some of them are head scratchers. Like, there's a Need for Speed film. Why? Why is the Need for Speed a film? I know some of the games have plots, but they're not like... They should. I mean, I don't think I've ever played a Need for Speed game, so please somebody tell me if these are actually like story masterpieces. I just don't know about it. But like, the stories are way for thin in those shit. Isn't it like Street Racer wants to get to the top of Street Racing League? You know, like, so again, it's like they just seem to pick some of them such random, like, just like almost like throwing a dart. Like, here we put like a ton of video games up on the wall, throw a dart, and we'll make a film of that one.
Well, I'll give you one better. Angry Birds.
Yeah, there's 2 Angry Birds films. How? How are there 2 Angry Birds films?
Because it makes
again, and that's supposed to have quite like a decent rating on Rotten Tomatoes, the second one. So there you go. Maybe it's amazing. And there's Minecraft is getting I don't know, like, it just seems weird, some of the ones that get picked. As well as, like, how you choose I think some of the worst things you can do is, like, when you're adapting them is to try, and we've kind of talked about this, but it's to try and, like, jam the adaptation into, like, an already, like, almost like a form, like a formula, a script. So, like, I've watched one of the Hitman films. I've not watched the second one. But both of them, like, just trying to, like, jam Agent 47 and the Hitman kind of world into, like, a generic action film.
Yeah.
Which, to an extent, if you play the Hitman games, you can play them like kind of action games, but you're sort of playing them wrong in a way. Not to say that you're like, you shouldn't play them like that, because you can if you want to, but the Hitman games are meant to be about like social stealth, you know, and like careful preparation and sort of planning and everything. Well, the one I saw the first one, and from what I saw the trailer of the second one, they're just generic action films. There's none of that kind. They might have one scene where like he does like some assassinating, but like it's all like car chases and like slow motion, like Matrix style gunfights and everything. So again, like, and that's not what Hitman is about, you know. And as well, like, I feel like Agent 47 is one of these characters that, like, he's fun to play as, but I don't know if I want to sit and watch a film about him, because he's not exactly like a likable character for the most part, or like a hero, so it's that kind of different. And that's sort of the thing, like, it's different to, like, when you're playing a video game, like, you are experiencing it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're watching a film, like, it's a more passive act. And that's not to say you can't get swept up and emotionally involved in a film, because you can do. And there's, like, so many films that really do, like, draw you into the world and everything. But it's a more passive activity than actually playing a video game. That's why I think sometimes we thought before, like, sometimes a video game story isn't, like, the most important thing, because you can kind of get swept up into the world or, like, the gameplay and stuff, and delve into it, and you can kind of overlook. I mean, think about BioShock Infinite, right?
Yeah.
If BioShock Infinite was a film, I think it would be a terrible film.
Oh, yeah.
For the most part. Because the plot is nonsensical, like, and you just be passively watching this thing and be like, what is happening? But, if you're playing it, me and you both got swept up in it. So, again, like, seeing a lot of them being made by people who just don't really have an interest, in the source material, and just kind of want to, like, pump it for some money, as opposed to, like, have any kind of love for it. And want to do well, like, again, and then you get caught in that thing of, like, how close an adaptation do you want? Like, the recent Tomb Raider film, like, it's okay, like, it's not a terrible film, and it's not a terrible adaptation, but it's, again, it kind of, I think for me, it kind of falls near that Prince of Persia way. But, like, if you play the reboot of the Tomb Raider franchise, which was, like, 2013, I think the first one came out, that was a very kind of dark film, and, like, there was a lot of, like, almost kind of horror elements, and, like, kind of grueling, like, Lara was, like, I think that was almost like a joke now, how, like, much Lara was just, like, injured and, like, like, impaled on things and everything, and the quite horrific death scenes you could have and stuff. Well, the Tomb Raider film kind of toned it down, and it was like I think it was like a 12, so they didn't really have, it was more like a kind of romp, maybe more akin to the older kind of Tomb Raider games. So again, you argue that's kind of failing in the adaptation side of it. But again, like, as we say, sometimes you can be too close in adaptation, and then you're like, what's the point? Like, I just go play the game. Or if you don't want to play the game, just go watch something on YouTube, watch a playthrough on YouTube. There are plenty of those. So they're like, the thing is, there's so many pitfalls on this road to making a video game adaptation that, like, that's why I think I'm so skeptical about it, because there's just so many ways for it to go wrong.
I mean, I think there is, like, two and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there's definitely two, like, I suppose, outline factors as well, beyond, like, trying to adapt a film and, like, make it both a good adaptation and a good film. It's like, do you ever remember the film Pixels with Adam Sandler? And the way, and again, it's like, it's obviously a mixed thing about the way people see, like, people who have video games as a hobby. But it's like, there's a lot of films like that where if it's not Pixels, it's like that gamer film. Do you ever remember that?
Was that the one with Gerard Butler?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, where he's like an FPS guy getting controlled by like a teenager or something. That was a weird film. But I suppose it's like that kind of, like, and again, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but it's like that kind of, the way they're interpreting, like, what gamers want, if you know what I mean. They're like saying, oh, they want this, like, cool, dark, gritty, or they want this kind of, they just want pixels, literally. They just want Pac-Man, they want, because if you remember, the poster for that is literally a giant thing of Pac-Man, because it's recognisable. And I don't think they really thought to, I mean, it's Adam Sandler, but, it's like, they didn't, like, make it probably with the intention of being like, oh, this is going to be, like, a really good, adaptation of, like, video game culture. It's just going to be it's just going to be things on the screen. I mean, it's the same with that gamer film. It's like, oh, FPSs are a thing, let's put that. Oh, Second Life's a thing, let's put that. It was like, just stuff, really. And I think that's the same for a lot of, or not a lot of them, but some of the worst end of these films. It's like, it's not an adaptation, it's not a good film, it is just stuff with the name slapped on it.
I think you've completely hit the nail on the head here. Like, so much of it is surface level. It's surface level adaptation. Pixels, it was like, oh, people just want to see Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. Like with Doom, it was like, oh, it's an FPS game, so let's just throw this FPS scene in. You're not actually, in the same way, those like, oh, we're putting it in this universe. That's just what people want to see. You're not actually getting to the heart of like why people enjoy these games and why people enjoy gaming. And honestly, I would argue the best video game adaptation that's ever been made is Wreck-It Ralph. I don't know if you've ever seen Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh yeah, no, I totally.
That is the best one. Because, like, first of all, it's a great film. number one, and but number two, there's enough. While it's like a completely original, it's an original game. I know he's kind of based off different game characters, but it's an original kind of game and an original character and everything. There's enough stuff in there. There's enough kind of nods and winks for gamers to be like, oh, that's fun. There's a cameo from somebody in there, but then there's like a reference to, I don't know, Final Fantasy or something. Enough of that. But there's also like enough of people to be like a kind of genuine like fondness for gaming, and like it's not like the butt of the joke, like you nerds like playing your games, and it's not like it's not like pandering, oh, this, how cool is this? Like it's not just like, oh, they just like the kind of like that gamer who's like, oh, they just like action, they just like surface level action. There's nothing beneath it. Well, Wreck-It had a heart and everything, and that's why I think why it's the best the kind of adaptation. But just so many of these seem to be surface level borrowing, without actually getting to the core of why people like these things.
And I mean, if you look at the video games themselves, which I know is like a whole other topic in itself, but they are really turning into films more than games these days. At least not all of them, obviously, but like a good chunk of them. Like, you and I joke because you and I, of course, doing the Let's Play of Heavy Rain just now, but I think that was like is probably one of the key like video game franchises, like the games made by Quantic Dream / David Cage, where they literally are just like quick time events. They're not really games in their own right, but they play out as films, like a kind of choose your own story, essentially.
Yeah.
And I feel as if nowadays, like obviously back when we were growing up, I think the main point of the games were just to be fun, whereas, don't get me wrong, like that's still the thing nowadays, but now there's like a lot more emphasis. Like, was it Battlefield 3 or 4 that had like an award winning, or it might have been Call of Duty, I can't remember. It might have been Ghosts, actually, that had like an award winning writer or something on it. It was
I think Ghost did actually have a.
Was it Ghost? Yeah.
Ghost have the guy from the Batman films, like the Nolan Batman ones, I want to say.
I can't remember. It was something.
Oh, no, maybe it was Advanced Warfare, actually. I think he might have been attached to it.
Yeah, it was definitely one of them that was like really. I can't even remember who, but anyway, yeah, he was like. It's just the point that they're trying to craft better like stories to give them more, because I mean, how many times have you heard that with a video game when they're like, oh, we want to create a more cinematic experience and things. They are trying to mirror like the films more than the films are trying to mirror the games, if you know what I mean, which I know is kind of like a very basic thing to say, but it seems as if they're doing a better job like adapting into like a interactive film. I mean, look at Until Dawn, like that's another perfect example of another choose your own story kind of thing, but it's another one of those games where you're like, what they're doing here is they're just adapting a film, or sorry, they're trying to make an interactive film maybe rather than a video game, whereas the films that are based on the video games are just like, let's just slap, I don't know, Sonic, Pikachu, like the Prince of Persia on a lunchbox, the Doom guy. Do you know, that's another thing, just slightly off topic, but the Doom guy wasn't even in that film. Neither was the power armor. I mean, that in itself is a tragedy, because they had the BFG, technically. That was about it. Yeah, that was about that, and they had it on Mars, I think.
Is it on Mars? Oh, maybe it is. I guess so.
I think they replaced Hell with Mars, and they called it Hell or something. Like there was some weird like plot loophole there, but yeah, never again. Never.
It's funny. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, it was finished ranting. That time.
No, fair. It was just funny you saying that, like video games being better adaptations of films rather than films being better adaptations of video games, because I was just thinking about like Naughty Dog, people who make Uncharted and The Last of Us. Their games are basically films. Yeah. No, I'm not trying to like slam them or anything like that. It's not a criticism, because they are like very like cinematic experiences. Like they are films, but they are really good adaptations of like films, you could argue. Like Uncharted is basically Indiana Jones, and stuff. So like I totally agree with you. Like video games are doing a better job of aping films. Than the other way around.
And I mean, yeah, The Last of Us definitely is like the perfect example. I would have said that the reason I'm laughing is because I would have said something like Heavy Rain or like Detroit Become Human would have been one of the examples there, but I feel as if maybe like The Last of Us is a better like example of it. I mean, technically, it could be considered just like another attempt of, like, this isn't even a word, but filmifying games, rather than, like, would you say it's like that, or, like, they're trying to gamify the experience? Like, make it more cinematic, really.
Well, I think, like, that is a trend in the that has been a growing trend in the AAA gaming industry, which is, like, I think now become just a standard thing, is that they do make these very cinematic experiences. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the ones that come out seem to basically be, you're almost like, this almost does appear like a kind of big budget film. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's so funny that Uncharted and The Last of Us are getting film adaptations, because like, to me, they're kind of films already. Like, you know, they're the kind of games that you like, people who aren't probably gamers could play, like, you know, in a way, like, they are very accessible. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they are recognizable enough to big screen, like summer blockbusters.
Oh, totally.
So, in a way, it is the kind of filmifying, is that even a word? Like, the filmifying of the games, of gaming. You know, like, if I just created a term there, a horrible, horrible term to say, but yeah, I totally agree.
We did it together, don't you, buddy? So, it kind of is like a wrapping up point, but what do you think, and this is going to be the generic, what do you think about the future of video game films, but like, with the release of like better video game films, do you feel as if it's gonna get better? Because I mean, I know technically we've got like a lot of, or not a lot, but there have been examples of a couple of series rather moving to like a Netflix format. Of course, the main example being The Witcher, which, fantastic show if you haven't seen it, but would you say there is hope? That's what I'm asking, essentially.
I guess there's hope. I'm still skeptical, I'm going to be honest, because I've yet to see enough evidence. Mm-hmm. We'll see, like, there's a lot of, there are quite a few coming up. So I said Uncharted and Last of Us are both in development. There's a Fallout TV series, apparently, as well.
Oh, God.
Minecraft, there's supposed to be a Tomb Raider reboot. Not reboot, sorry, sequel. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ones in development. So there's supposed to be a Duke Nukem where John Cena will play Duke Nukem, which sounds kind of funny. Five Nights at Freddy's, that's due to be, I think. Mm-hmm. That's supposed to. Fruit Ninja, apparently. There you go. Gears of War is supposed to be getting one. Dave Bautista wants to make a Gears of War.
Yeah, I would watch that.
I would watch it as well, to be honest. Like, so, I don't know, like, there's maybe some interesting ones there. I'm gonna be honest, I'm skeptical. I said I haven't seen enough proof, and I just think, like, because it's going to be made in these big kind of studios, I just think it will be generic at best, to be honest. I think it will be, like, above average, but no more. Mm-hmm. I really can't see them being, but unless it's, like, you know, unless it's people who really, really have a genuine love for, like, a particular game or a particular series, mm-hmm. and really get the freedom to pour into it. You know, I can't. I'm honestly, maybe I'm being too negative, but I just can't see it. So I'm going to remain skeptical.
I mean, that's a completely valid stance to take on it, because as you said, there's just been so many bad video game films that you think, is it going to get better? And it's quite interesting because what we were talking about last week about the Super Mario Brothers, that was so bad that Nintendo never really attempted another live action film until Detective Pikachu, and that absolutely. Obviously that soared with popularity because it is a well-made film. There are like bits you can obviously pick out, but I mean that's the same with any film really, that there are like going to be plot holes or why didn't X do Y, you know, that kind of thing. But it's again, I don't feel as if, like, I have to agree with you. I feel as if it's like it's not a lot against the like rising tide of bad films that already exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one thing for a film like Street Fighter, for example, or Mortal Kombat, the old one, to be bad, but it's good. Like, so bad that it's good. I mean, even look at the Dungeons and Dragons film, kind of going off on a tangent. Like, that's so bad, but it's got its moments where you're kind of like, oh, you know, with a couple of friends you could watch it, and it would be like an enjoyable experience, like The Room, or Birdemic, or those kind of films, which actually I still need to get you to watch Birdemic. But...
God.
Oh, yeah, you'll love it, trust me.
I'm sure I will.
But when it comes to ones that are just bottom of the barrel, just... I mean, you know, as we said, with Doom, Prince of Persia, Hitman, Assassin's Creed, those kind of film, anything by Uwe Boll. It's one thing to make a bad film. To make an unforgettable or just downright boring experience is just another thing.
Yeah.
And the fact it seems to always be video game film, like, I'm not saying other films are exempt from being bad films, like there's tons of bad films that aren't based in video games, but it seems as if the reputation heavily falls on video game films rather than vice versa of it happening to any other genre. Because I mean, if you look at, like, although it's oversaturated now, I mean, superhero films, thanks to like not Batman, God, imagine. Like, well, technically Batman, but also like the Marvel films.
Yeah.
Oh, the Nolan ones, yeah. And yeah, the whole Marvel universe. Like, although there's a lot of them now, like, there's still kind of a rise in popularity of those superhero films. And again, that's a whole other topic. But yeah, with video game films, it seems that even with non-gamers, it seems to be the laughingstock.
Yeah.
Kind of. Maybe laughingstock's like a too harsh a term, you know? It's like, you know, it's being like paraded in the street with a bell being rung, yelling shame. But it's not that bad. But at the same time, you kind of think, is it good? Is it going to be good as the next one? Because every time they announce something, like, if you notice this, every time they announce something and then they're like, it like takes ages for them to actually make the damn film. Is what I'm trying to get at. Like, they'll announce so and so a film's coming out this year, and then it just disappears. I mean, like the Sonic film or the Mario film that's supposed to be coming. Although I think they have got a trailer for the new Mario film, which is actually quite interesting. Just before we finish up, but that is quite interesting. Like the fact that for Mario they've done the opposite, and instead of going for live action, they've gone for 3D a bit more, which is quite interesting. Like. Yeah, they've just dove into like the entire animated scene, which makes sense though, right enough. But again, there's a lot of, or not a lot of films, but there's a lot of games that you definitely couldn't adapt. Like, I mean, look at Skyrim. Can you imagine trying to adapt something like Skyrim?
There's a way to do that. Like, I would argue that that's actually a good candidate for an adaptation, as long as you don't try and do one of the established storylines. Yeah, I totally agree. If you try and do a complete adaptation, like, you're going to have an absolute mess of a film. But if you were to take the world of Skyrim and tell a unique story, I think you do have a potential there. But you're probably right in the fact that they'd be like, oh no, we better have like the Dragonborn storyline, and that would likely be a mess.
I suppose it's a bit similar to what Star Wars is going through, where it's like, on the one hand, you get like stories that, because the Star Wars universe is so huge, you could have like 2 stormtroopers hosting a podcast, wink, like an abandoned planet or something like that, or you could have like Jim the janitor, like halfway across the galaxy in his story. When are we going to get Jim a Star Wars story? When are we going to get a Disney? But that's the thing though, it's like, well, a lot of the like kind of major properties that they've got going, especially the films, they try to like interlink the, like the main characters from other things.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's not good enough that, like, for example, the Solo film, which I know I'm going in a tangent, but I swear I have a point. It's like slight spoilers, but I don't think anybody cares because it was not a good film. But you see one of the characters from that, who has completely nothing to do with the main plot, end up talking to one of the main antagonists from the previous films, and it's that like trying to interlink everything. It's just a danger, really. Just trying to interlink, everyone and everything together. And it's like going back to Skyrim, it's trying to, if you try to interlink, as you said, the Dragonborn story with, I don't know, Jim the barkeep, let's just say, again. He's been promoted from wiping mead off the table. He now serves the mead, but it's like if you made him the Dragonborn or had him like tagging alongside the I mean, maybe it would be a fun romp. Maybe it's. I think they would just need to take a risk, in all honesty. I think they would just need to take a risk and see where it goes, really. And then hopefully we can actually get a good adaptation. Or rather, not a good adaptation. I think the main aim is to get better films out of this like genre. I mean, what would you hope for?
Better films, to be honest. Just like films made by people who actually have like a passion for these properties, or just maybe just stop. One or the other. Stop doing it, or else like do it with like some passion and some love.
Do it properly.
Yeah.
Do it properly, or don't do it at all. Got you.
At all, yeah.
Got you. Oh dear. So yeah, should we wrap things up, do you think?
Yeah. Let's put a bow on this.
Yep. Right. So yeah, Adam, as always, thank you so much for joining me and the wonderful world of our ramblings.
No, this was good fun. This was a lot to talk about in this one, and I think we covered a lot of good stuff. So my pleasure to close to bring the curtains down on this discussion.
So of course next week we're going to have our 10-hour discussion on E.T. Not the film. Nah, I'm only kidding. Nah. I wouldn't put you guys through it. I wouldn't put myself through it. After the conversation we just had, maybe I would put Adam through it. I don't know. I'm only kidding. Sort of. Yeah, you and I are going to be having words after this.
I love you too, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, so is this your last episode in Satsunami?
Well, I mean, after I play ET, I presume I'll just implode.
Yeah.
So, probably. It was fun. It was fun, y'all.
I was going to say, you go into that big Atari in the sky.
Yeah, oh god, I mean, I'm going to hell.
It's not that bad, surely.
It is. You know the history of Atari. You've seen what they've made. It's terrible.
Well, that is true. I feel as if the sound effects alone they're just a nightmare. So, yeah, moving on from that very depressing note. If you would like to see more of, both my content and our content in Satsunami, you can find me personally on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook as well, and of course Twitch under the name Satsunami42. You can catch us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube as well, so if you don't have any of the podcast apps, although you can find us in all the podcast apps, just search Satsunami, and yeah, we will pop up. But yeah, we're also on YouTube. We've got our own dedicated channel, just under the name Satsunami, so yeah, feel free to check that out. And yeah, of course, on YouTube, we've also got our own Let's Play series called T-Posing, which T-posing has been a lot of fun, hasn't it?
It really has been. I had a blast doing it.
Because you and I have been playing Heavy Rain, and my other friend, Green Shield, and I have been playing through, both Warzone and Breath of the Wild, but also you've dropped in for a couple of the Warzone videos. Mm-hmm. And that has been a lot of fun.
Both swiftly booted me out.
Yeah. We didn't boot you out. You were dishonourably discharged. There's a big difference here. Don't you bring that sass into the end of the stream.
I'm sorry.
Oh, God. So yeah, if you fancy that, then I'll just put the link in. If you fancy checking that out, please feel free to. It's a lot of fun to record them, like both the podcast, the Let's Plays, and just the general streams and hanging out with you guys as well. So yeah, thank you all so much for dropping by. It's always a pleasure, isn't it?
Indeed, it always is.
Yes. And as always, guys, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, don't watch any UV Bowl films. And stay hydrated, of course. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.